Excuse me. Oh, I'm live. There we are. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. I wonder how many make. What's this? Oh, mute. There we go. First time. Let's see if there's. Oh, I don't need to type, do I? Are we on live? Right. I guess we are live. And we're testing out the live stream. It's the first time we've used it. So if any of you are there, I don't think we are yet. It's not 10:30.
Well, you've been live for 34 seconds. There you go. Who's in?
Oh, hello. Can you hear? Hello again, folks. Can you hear me and see me okay? I have no idea. Oh, nice. Today's the Q&A again. Working just fine. Oh, great. There we go. We're live. Excellent. It's nice to see you all here. Thanks very much for joining me. I'll try and look at the camera. Excellent. Excellent. I hope you enjoyed the episodes. And I wasn't too sure where EDT was, Babs. I was thinking, oh, it was Eastern Pacific time. Is that you? Possibly. EPT, maybe. Who knows? Well, I thought I'd pop on and say hello to all you folks, just really to say thank you for joining us all the time and supporting the channel. And if you have any questions for me, I've got about half an hour tonight, I think, so I'll be delighted to answer them for you. Or if you just like to have a chat, so fire away. East Coast America, it's 5:30 p.m. here in EDT. There we go. It's 10:30 here in GMT +1. I think our clocks will be going back soon. Okay. I'm sitting here with my wife, and we're just chilling at the end of the evening. Eastern Daylight Savings Time. There we go. Figured that one out. East Coast America. East Coast America. Eastern Pacific Time didn't make sense to me. It's sorry, I've got to get used to looking at this camera. Thank you very much, Sean, and thanks, Babs. Have you got any questions for me at all? If so, fire away. What's your favorite Dune book? How do you think Dune 7 may have gone, and any fan fiction? Okay, thanks, Sean. Let's see, which is my favorite Dune book is God Emperor of Dune. Just because it's so different, and Leto II is just such an interesting character. Though, of course, the original book I think is great. But I really like God Emperor of Dune. In terms of rereading the books, it's the one I like rereading the best. How do I think Dune 7 may have gone? I've got a few theories on that, but let me see. I think the whole thing about Dune 7 revolves around who are Daniel and Marty, and I think there's 3 or 4 different ideas that you could come up with, but obviously I think Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson answered those questions. But part I don't know, I like speculating. We share a few books, but you're right on the rereadability of it. Yeah, thank you. Let me see. I think the whole Daniel and Marty thing, there's a bunch of clues in the books, and there's something in the appendices of the very first Dune book that lets you know that the whole breeding program of the Bene Gesserit isn't their breeding program. I think Frank sows a little seed of mystery right there. In terms of who are Daniel and Marty, the whole Butlerian jihad thing, with Samuel Butler's work, it kind of makes sense that they would have something to do with thinking machines. But the way the book goes, it kind of suggests that they may be some kind of advanced face dancers. So I'm not too sure. But there's something about the end of the last book that I always got a feeling that how would I put it? There's something of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead in it. And it's to do with the Duncan Idaho character noticing Daniel and Marty. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with the play, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. But the kind of thing that I'm talking about is in that play, a character tosses a coin and it always comes up heads, I think. And no matter what, it leads to the realization ultimately that they're characters in a play. And I don't know. There's I like to think about it, I suppose, but there's a possibility that Daniel and Marty are Frank and Bev, and I don't know. It's interesting to think about, I suppose. And whenever you take a look at each one of these possibilities, they all seem kind of equally valid, because I think Frank likes to deceive his readers quite a lot to set up things that are coming along after, you know. Excuse me. So I hope that answers your question. Any fan fiction? I'm not too sure what you mean, Seth. Have I read any Dune fan fiction? Is that what you mean? I have to see people responding in time. Is quite interesting, this. But let me see. In terms of what about yourselves? I mean, Babs is saying that God Emperor is her favorite book. What about yourself, Seth? What's your favorite one? I'm not very used to this, by the way, folks, but I'm used to talking to people, but face to face and looking at eyes and stuff. So I'll try and maintain a bit of a bit of a jibber jabber, I suppose. But if you've got any more questions, fire them away. And we're just sitting here in my very messy room. So, oh, here we go. Let's see. Babs is saying, I honestly think Lord Leto didn't use his prescience as much as thought. It was easy for him to predict much just from looking back at the patterns of human behavior, just from his memories alone. Yeah. But I suppose Leto's got the whole, what I think is interesting about that, what you're saying is the dominant personalities in his other memory, and that one comes to the fore, and that is the Egyptian pharaoh Harem. He's also known as Cheops. I think he's who's a particularly brutal, considered a brutal, civilizing kind of pharaoh. And I think there's a lot of different dictators in Leto II. What have we got here? Do you think Herbert intended to convey, oh, here we go, a Spenglerian concept of cyclical history, especially since the Golden Path recreates exactly the same problems as the synchronized worlds? So maybe the breeding program is actually the work of thinking machines. Daniel and Marty are independent face dancers, and somehow Duncan fits in. I've always figured that God Emperor's, and God Emperor's your favorite book as well. So, where it's actually just full of teasers for the unknown enemy. The cyclical thing. Where are we? Just back up here. Concept of cyclical history. I suppose the whole thing within Dune is that you get to see the same patterns repeated. And I'm trying to remember the guy's name. Donald E. Palumbo has a book on this. It's to do with chaos theory in Foundation and Dune, and he looks at those spiral iterations in the sense that they're chaos. And it's interesting that it depends on where you look at where the circles begin, if you like, because I think I don't know what you guys think about this, but I don't always think of God Emperor of Dune as the beginning of a new trilogy. And it's to do with what Seth is talking about in terms of the cycles of patterns. So particularly with Paul Atreides and Leto, Paul Atreides is a warning about heroes. So be careful if this is what you want. Well, he delivers it to Leto II is the same warning, and it's almost kind of, I really warned you to an extent, but if you didn't think it could get worse, let me show you. It can always get worse. Me and my wife agree on this, don't we? Things can always get worse. But so Leto II is the same problem amplified beyond belief. And the question I think that you're saying within the cyclical patterns is, what if we got to the seventh book written by Frank Herbert, what's the point of, if we've had Paul and we've had Leto, what is Duncan to become? And to me, I'm not sure that Duncan would be so are we going to get finally a messiah that saves everybody? I think possibly that Duncan as a Kwisatz Haderach could have been much, much worse if you went with what Frank's trying to say about heroes. But if you look at the patterns of the books, really, if you think of Dune and then Dune Messiah, and as Paul's story, and we kind of have a handover between Paul and Leto in Children of Dune. I sometimes don't think of the first three books as a trilogy, with the patterns that you're talking about. I think that Dune and Dune Messiah have that pattern, and the next pattern begins in Children of Dune, and so the books are almost pairs, if you see what I mean. So that Dune and Dune Messiah go very well together. Children of Dune and God Emperor of Dune, and then the two Bene Gesserit books. So the other thing, I suppose, with him saying that there's going to be a seventh book and he was done, was the intent to wrap up that cycle of behavior. And finally, and if it is almost maybe cyclical, I think the fact that Donald E. Palumbo is trying to say it's more like a spiral. So I think that if we have that repetition of the two book pattern, there is something going to happen with the seventh book, and I honestly don't know. As much as there's the notes that were left that Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson used. If you handed those notes to 10 different writers, you would still get 10 different books. I think regardless of what Frank Herbert's notes were, what he would have actually turned it into would have been something possibly quite different. Oh, here we go. So I'm not busy talking. Okay, let's see. So maybe the breeding program is actually the work of thinking machines. Daniel and Marty are independent face dancers, and somehow Duncan fits in. Yeah, sorry. Seth is actually just. Sorry, let's see. It's actually just full of teasers of the unknown enemy. And I see the pairings, but never thought of that previously. I'll check out that book by Donald E. Palumbo too. Sean says, thank you very much. Donald, that book's quite hard to get. I think, as are a lot of these. There's quite a few odd books on Frank Herbert in the Dune series. You'll find most of them in my bibliography on the last video. But quite a few of them are hard to get these days. And if you are looking for them, ABE books is where I tended to track most of these things down. Yeah, it's just the thing I thought. Babs, the pairings. It's just the way I was thinking about. I suppose I approach it from a few different angles. And what Seth was saying about the breeding program is the work of the thinking machines. And Daniel could be independent. Daniel and Marty could be independent face dancers. That all fits as well. So the thing about I suppose for me, how I think a lot of people have different interpretations of what Daniel and Marty could be. Every time I think about them, I think that they're all quite equally valid. That you can make a really good argument for them all. And as I said, I like. Part of me just likes. I like the fact that I suppose that the books were unfinished for a long time. And whenever I approached doing this, that there were no new books, and we didn't know about these notes, etc. Excuse me. So whenever I was approaching the PhD, the new Kevin J. Anderson, Brian Herbert universe, it was only kind of starting to emerge there. I started doing this in 2006. Clive Bloom says, I haven't read any of the Brian Herbert, Kevin J. books, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts on how they finished the final book that Frank wasn't able to complete before his death. By the time I had my PhD, wrapping it up, these books were out. So I did have a look at them just in terms of being able to look at the conclusion. I suppose I have my own thoughts on it. The books are the problem, I think, for a lot of people with the Kevin J. Anderson, Brian Herbert books is that they don't sound like Frank Herbert's voice. What you would call the authorial voice, and Dune really has his stamp all over it. And I suppose we have other authors who have passed away, and we've had people move into those kind of intellectual properties. I think L. Sprague de Camp is a good example of working within the Conan universe. And it depends on the author who picks. Some writers will try to write like that author, I think, and he did a very good job. Whereas I think it's the same with is it Charlie Higson maybe who writes the new James Bond novels, and you've got an attempt to sound like Ian Fleming. It's very hard to do for Frank Herbert, and particularly I think where it comes out is all in the openings of each chapter begin with epigraphs or works from hagiographies or biographies, and it's there that they just don't sound. They don't have a sense of gravitas. Um, and I think apart from that aside, the books kind of do follow a logical conclusion to, and I think everybody would agree that you can see the logic of where the stories go. But the books end with what you would call multiple Deus ex machinas, um, which is a term from Greek and Roman theatre, I suppose, the ghost in the machine, the little god in the machine. And it's where you basically don't wrap things up, but you just, God pops down and goes, well, hey, solve your problems and job's done, story's over. The sort of, where would you get the best example of that is in the Aeschylus's Oresteia. Um, that's literally the god in the machine comes down, Athena comes down and wraps up, and that's actually to do with the Atreides myth, believe it or not. So where are we? But they're satisfactory, but they're you know. Let me see. I hope that answers your question, Cloudbloom. But it's worth reading them maybe to get a conclusion to the story. Let's see. I haven't read any of them, so okay. Really hear about the voice. Okay, big fan of the audiobooks, and there is a difference. And again, that I suppose that authorial voice is in your own head as well. Have you read The Wheel of Time? I have not. And so do you have a favourite for a long time? Mine was The Lord of Chaos. Seth, it's something that every time I come near on a bookshelf, it looks far too big for me to engage with, and I have a problem with very long series of books. It's something that kind of drove me away from fantasy literature for a while. I'm not a big fan of trilogies, but I understand it's a pretty decent chunk of decent fantasy literature. But it's massive, and it's a bit like a research to temp Purdue, if you know what I mean. You'd be in search of lost time, and I'm getting to the point in life, I suppose, where I like to try and read as many different things as possible. Um, Correct. Frank Herbert is an almost counter Enlightenment voice to him, like Isaiah Berlin. His son is, in my opinion, much more mediocre and too stuck in a contemporary point of view. Cloudman says, Seth, I absolutely love The Wheel of Time. Finished my seventh read last year. It's amazing. Well, I'll tell you what, Cloudbloom, answer me this. How many books are there in the Wheel of Time series now? Because I know it's about to start on Amazon. And tell me, how long does it take you to read them? And if you can give me a reasonable time frame, I might actually consider having a go at them, because there's something I haven't read. Uh, I also read the first three Kevin J. Anderson and Brian Herbert books. The House Atreides, House Harkonnen, House Carino ones. And again, they have a good, well established universe to play in. But I read them, I enjoyed them enough, but to me they weren't really Frank Herbert, and it wasn't Frank Herbert's Dune universe. And there's another thing I suppose I should tell you, that all of that you're saying is actually a PhD, and they do say that you're meant to do a PhD on something that you love, but by the time you're finished it, you'll hate it. And I've actually talked to there's another person who's done a PhD on Dune, Cara Kennedy, and you'll find her work over at dunescholar.com, and had a chat with her, and she's finished the PhD, and also does we neither of us hate the source material, having done having immersed ourselves in so much of it. I have to say, having done all that work, still actually love the Dune series. 14 books, I think, one prequel, not really necessary to read. Power through the series in about 3 months, maybe six. Excuse me. 14 books with one, totaling 15. Gargantuan series, but I was so engrossed every time that I believe I finish one book every week or two. Yeah, it might be worth having a go. I certainly might have a. It's one of those ones that I've always been aware of the first book in the library. Um, but I've actually got a bunch of things that I'm looking to read through at the minute, and a whole bunch of material that I want to kind of revisit for the science fiction station, and some other Frank Herbert material as well. Um, hmm. But the Wheel of Time's coming to Amazon, and I think that's quite. I'd say that the one big science fiction series that I'm a big fan of outside of the Dune series, I don't like to use the word fan too often, is the culture books, and I'm thinking I'm going to have a good delve into those soon. Again, a lot of this epic science fiction I think owes a lot to to Dune, and the series that developed out of it. I think there we go. I hope I was getting all evening. Hello, evening. About you, Doc. Good to see you live. Left Northern Ireland last year. Missed my black spice. The Guinness. Hello, evening. How are you? Where are you at these days if you're not in Northern Ireland? I wonder. And do you have any questions for me, evening? Or are there any other questions from anyone else? I'm quite enjoying this, by the way. I hope you can all still hear me and see me okay. Cheers. Blackcurrant juice. Ooh. Not Guinness. If spice were real, if aliens stopped by and offered you some, what would you do? Spice is 100% addictive and fatal to those who withdraw from it. So that's the fatal bit that I don't like. And yeah, you mentioned enjoying earlier J.G. Ballard, and I think you mentioned Philip K. Dick as well. Any other favourites in that vein of examining human nature inside alternative social structure? And evenings in Greece. Hello. In Greece. I'll let you have a think. Evening. Very nice to be in Greece. I'd love to be there. Sean, let's see. Philip K. Dick. I love Philip K. Dick. I've been reading Philip K. Dick since I was about 9 or 10. And thanks to my wife buys me second-hand books for Christmas. And so basically, whenever at Christmas, I give her an author's name, and she buys me as many of those author's books as possible. So I have read literally everything by Philip K. Dick except one book, would you believe? And I refuse to read it because then I haven't, if you see what I mean, then I've read everything. So Clans of the Alphean Moon is the only Philip K. Dick book I haven't read yet. And I actually started it and put it down because I really wanted to savor it. Excuse me. Everything by Philip K. Dick is brilliant because I'm encouraging my wife to have a look at some of his books at the moment. It's simply anything you read by him. The way I would explain Philip K. Dick, regardless of what you think of the different stories, is that you don't see it coming. I didn't expect that. That's and as much as absolutely, it's about what it means to be human and well, the nature of reality. I think those two questions occupy him vastly. Yeah, he's a really interesting man, and the whole pink light incident and stuff like that. He's very worthy of study. I'd say. Let me see, who have we got on the bookshelf? The Strugatsky brothers. Anything by those. And looking at the human nature in particular, as you say, the Strugatsky brothers are quite strange, and some of their books are quite serious. Some of them are very funny and very quirky. Some of them are quite Dick-esque, I suppose. They're fantastic. I would be let's see, who have we got? Dan Simmons. I haven't read anything by him in a while, but all of the Endymion or the Hyperion Cantos books are worth a read. And he's also released Ilium and Olympus, which are also really worth a read. Let's see. I'll read that out in a second, evening. Who else have we got? Quite a lot of Philip K. Dick. Yeah, Ursula Le Guin, I would say, and Robert Heinlein. Absolutely. I would read a lot of older science fiction, and Alfred Bester is also. I'm going to be doing a few videos on Alfred Bester soon. Excuse me. If you don't know Alfred Bester, check him out. He's amazing. Very quickly, just catch up here. Let's see what we've got. Michael Evening says Michael Moorcock is a legend. Also, I love the Dick. Two completely different but entwined minds. Michael Moorcock is great. I've met Michael Moorcock, and I've a couple of stories about. Well, I've got a story about meeting him, and I've got a story about one of his books that ended up in the sea. I might tell you one time. Clive Bloom, highly recommend Manga Berserk. Some very brutal scenes, but I can't recommend it enough. And it's an incredible story with phenomenal artwork. Cheers, Clive Bloom. I've been brought up on 2000 AD my entire life, so outrageously violent comics are no. Been reading them since I was 4. Let's see. Just wanted to say thank you for your videos. Super surreal. Helped me get through the long COVID night last year, Dr. Sloan. Thank you so much. Very kind. Sean Whelan, thank you for those recommendations. Oh, here, yeah. Any Stanislaw Lem, since you mentioned Soviet science fiction authors? Stanisław, sorry, reading English there would make a bad news reader, wouldn't I? Stanisław Lem I love Stanisław Lem and would highly recommend to him. If you haven't seen it, type in Stanisław Lem and go for his Google Doodle. There's a Google Doodle for celebrating Stanisław Lem's Siberia, and it's interactive and it's fantastic. I use it in tutoring sometimes with my younger kids. Berserk is a Kentaro Miura, if anyone's interested, sadly passed away on June 6th this year. The main mangas that are manga, sorry, that I really particularly enjoyed is the Lone Wolf and Cub books. And I'll go ahead and say it, but it's some of my early life resembles I'm the baby in the cart. I mean, who else have I got? Help myself through lockdown. Thank you. Michael Moorcock's brilliant. His multiverse characters sort of reincarnate the same ideas. So you tend to have a hero, a sidekick, and a weapon, and they're reincarnated throughout the multiverse. And he takes a lot of mythology and works with it. But the Elric stories in particular, and I quite like the Corum stories and the Ericos stories, and actually what's he called? Nomad of the Time Streams. I mean, sorry, if you're talking Michael Moorcock, you'd just keep going, wouldn't you? And of course, the idea of Tanalorn, the Eternal City, is quite good. Any Neil Stevenson's fans here? That's Neil Stevenson's. Oh goodness, what do you call him? Thomas Covenant, isn't it? I think Snow Crash was my introduction to his work in the 90s. Or maybe I'm wrong on the wrong person altogether. Sorry. Great cyberpunk book. Let me see, who else have we got here? Ira Levin's got some pretty good classic science fiction. And Olaf, yes, I could highly recommend Olaf Stapleton to anybody. Snow Crash, Show Crash, is that or Snow Crash? Sorry. Snow Crash, I think, and Diamond Age are excellent. Is that the Snow Crash that's on Netflix? I'm wondering. Or no, is that Snow? No, I'm thinking of something else altogether. Sorry, that's Snowpiercer, isn't it? My memory goes a wee bit gooey sometimes. Let's see. In terms of anybody else, I'm not too sure. I used to read quite a bit of Ray Bradbury, and I suppose the usual suspects, Asimov and Clarke, etc. I was talking to you a bit about Alfred Bester. I don't know if any of you guys know Alfred Bester. I'm in Northern Ireland, so I guess a lot of people don't know of him at all here. America is probably a fair bit different. But he's got 2 books in particular, and after Dune, within certain circles, shall we say, that I'm not a part of, that the book called The Star's My Destination, which is also called Tiger, is considered to be the best science fiction book after Dune. I would tell you that it's an absolute cracker of a book. And Bester also wrote The Demolished Man, which is a perfect murder novel. And it's a strange book because you kind of know all about it. It's all done and dusted. It's not about the murder itself. It's about getting away with it, and getting away with it when all the police can read your mind. And it is a fantastic novel. And if you have, and there's something about Alfred. Now he has other stuff, by the way. I've got a collection of his short stories, and I understand he's the guy that came up with the Green Lantern. What would you call it, chant or something? I don't know. I don't read the Green Lantern, but he's a few other books, Extras and the Computer Connection, I think is the other name for that. But he plays with the words in the text, and particularly with the psychic cops or the telepathic cops. And depending on what copy, I think there's some different versions of his books that they're absolute joy to read. But the protagonist from The Star's My Destination, Tiger, is called Gully Foyle. And the plot of that story is about a man basically who's considered worthless, and he's marooned on a spaceship for about 170 days or something. And the idea is another ship comes along, and without giving away any of the plot, this is just the premise of the story. It sees him and it's meant to rescue him, puts a spotlight on him, and just leaves him there, just buggers off. And this man's rage is massive. And he basically decides that he's going to hunt that ship down, hunt anyone down who's got anything to do with that ship, and just kill them all. And it's referred to, Tiger, The Star's My Destination is called the Iliad of science fiction because its main theme is revenge. And if you know the Iliad begins with "Sing, muse of the wrath of Achilles." So that's why it's not the Iliad in that sense of science fiction. It's called the Iliad of science fiction for that reason, that revenge is its dominant theme, and it's the most amazing book. Yeah, Moby Dick is on my list of get around to reading. But yeah, that. See if the stream doc so we can refer back later. I will do. I've never done this before, and I wasn't too sure how it was going to work. And I figured I have a quite a nice small audience, and I genuinely wanted to say hello to you guys properly, and not to be cut off at the end of every episode when we kind of have a few questions. So I was happy enough to do this, and it seems to be going well. So we'll see about getting organised with a few of these things. And I said I'm used to, I've got the gift of the gab, I suppose, so I'm used to talking. So, yeah. Let's see. Last recommendation before I go: The King Killer Chronicles by Patrick Rothfuss are my favourite fantasy books, right up there with The Wheel of Time. Check it out. Take care, everyone, and thank you, Doug. Thank you very much, Cloudbloom. All the very best to you. Yeah, I'm getting a lot of recommendations in at the minute, and thank you very much. This is one of them. Thank you, Sean. I'm happy to chat for a couple more minutes, or if you have any more questions. And again, I suppose for me, I did all this work. I started doing it in 2006, so I stopped being a lecturer and went to do a PhD, and it didn't all go quite according to plan. But eventually got my PhD in 2010. So all of this work was basically what we tried to do with these videos was we were trying to get them done for the film last year, and we knew we were going to fail because there was no way that once we figured out the film was coming out, we decided to try and do these videos and get some life into the Dune PhD. And basically we knew we were going to fail, but the film got delayed. So it allowed us to get them all done out in time. And the reason why we kind of decided to do these 36 on the 36 days leading up to when Dune comes out here is that we didn't really know what we were doing too well at the start, and we made some real problems and errors with the sound, and we'd got enough feedback from people that they were enjoying it and getting something out of it that we wanted to fix it all. So we fixed all the sound, particularly to try and get it out to a broader audience. We've put some English subtitles on it, and that was the hope there. So in a sense, we kind of are doing a wee countdown to the film now. It was kind of what we hoped to have done, but never thought we could have. So there you go. Alan Dean Foster, Readers Babs is asking, and Evening's asking me, did you ever go to the comic book shop in Smithfield Market? I have a long history with the comic book shop in Smithfield Market, Evening, that goes beyond what I can even tell you. Yes, I'm well versed in Smithfield for a lot of reasons. I'll not discuss that here, but it's got a lot to do with Northern Ireland. And I love Smithfield Market's comic book shops, and it used to have the place where you would get your science fiction and Dungeons and Dragons gear in Northern Ireland was a shop called the Modeller's Nook, which was also called the Dungeon. And it was the only place really for a long time. But yeah, Smithfield Market was a great place. Still is, I suppose. Alan Dean Foster, Babs has been asking about. Babs has asked for me to possibly do a video on Alan Dean Foster, and I'm going to do that actually. I'm just exceptionally busy. Um, but Alan Dean Foster, if you don't know, is behind a lot of the novelizations of quite a lot of science fiction biggies, if you like. I mean, he's also the author really behind the Star Wars. He's the Star Wars novel, the Alien books, and he also my favorite ones by Alan Dean Foster are there's a series of books called the Spell Singer novels, which are about let me see if I can remember this right, about a character called John Thomas Merriweather, who how best to describe it is I suppose it's Wind in the Willows meets meets Lord of the Rings meets the 60s on cannabis, and it has a bit of science fiction to it and a bit of fantasy to it, but it's yeah, it's about a human who gets transported to a world where all the animals have evolved equally, and there's magic, and there's also technology, and they're very fun books. They're not too highbrow, but they're very well written. And he's a great writer, Alan Dean Foster. And I think didn't he write? I think he wrote the novelizations for Alien and Aliens as well. But the other book that Babs that I would know by him is for anybody way back. I was 4 when Star Wars came out, and let me see. It would have been, I don't know. It's a book called Splinter of the Mind's Eye, and there were a few kind of early Star Wars novels. I think there was three Han Solo books. I don't think they were by Alan Dean Foster though, but there was a kind of book I think, and I'd be hard pressed to remember what it was about to be honest. But it had a great cover. If any of you see it out there, I don't know with all the Disney Star Wars stuff. I'm not really that interested, but I quite enjoyed reading it. So Alan Dean Foster, um, yeah, is and I dare say he has a few. I think he has another set of science fiction books, isn't it? Something about some kind of flying snake. I don't know what I haven't read them, but excuse me, Babs might know what I'm talking about. But yeah, worth. I might have a wee look at him. Definitely. Sean says, "You're satisfied the sorely needed niche of analysis of Dune on YouTube. On YouTube, there's not much else that goes deep except the analysis by the distributist and by Aaron McIntyre, and this blows them away." Thanks, Sean. Well, as I said, it's just me. A lot of it's just me reading my old work. I'm having I suppose I'm a bit of a fan of the Dune series, like you guys. Um, I have the patience to wait on it. uh, oh, I am looking forward. I have to say, by the way, I'm really looking forward to seeing the film. We don't have an IMAX within anywhere close to us, unfortunately. But and with COVID's been flaring here a bit, so our cinema endeavours haven't been looking too optimistic. But I haven't been to the movies in about what 2 years now, maybe. Believe it or not. Pip and Flinks. That's the series I was thinking on. Thank you, Babs. Um, have I read the Inkle comic, Doc? No, I haven't. No. The Inkle comic is that? Oh, what's his face? What's his name? Goodness, what do you call that? John Rudowski's. And Mobius. Is that the Inkle comic that I'm thinking on evening? I'm not too sure. And if that is the comic that you're talking about, no, I haven't read it, but yes, I'd really like to. That's the one. Yeah, Mobius. I understand Splinter of Mind's Eye was intended to be the second Star Wars movie. Ah, there you go. I don't know. Star Wars was quite an interesting experience for me. I was 4 and went to see it twice at the cinema. I loved it. I went to see it as a double bill with The Empire Strikes Back as well. Whenever it came out, the old big wraparound cinema in Dublin. But yeah, no, I haven't read the Incal. Sorry, evening. It's on my list, I suppose. What would be the last set of comic books that I've read would be Halo Jones again. Picked myself up as a treat. The Ballad of Halo Jones, which is that's the last. Again, it's my comic tastes are quite British. I suppose in that sense, I don't know. American comics are not. Never really gotten into the whole American superhero movement, if you like. the British comics have always been quite grittier, and particularly if you know 2000 AD's history, American comics steal their writers and artists every 7 years. Um, I loved Arrival, but was lukewarm on his Dune. This is Denis Villeneuve's Blade Runner sequel, so cautiously optimistic about this Dune version. Also, unlike most Dune fans, I don't hate the Lynn adaptation. Um, excuse me. My introduction to Dune, Sean, was the David Lynch adaptation, and I love it. I absolutely love it. I was, funny enough, watching the Rocky Horror Picture Show the other week with my wife, and I was saying to her that I think the David Lynch Dune film. I don't know if you know the way they do kind of Rocky Horror fun nights in cinemas and stuff, and people dress up, but I think they should do. I think they should do that with Dune, David Lynch. It's so wonderfully quotable and kind of operatic in its sense, and like what Frank Herbert intended, actually high camp. And I think it's an enormously fun film. And I love it. Actually, I quite enjoyed the TV series as well. In terms of Blade Runner, the recent Blade Runner sequel, my preferred Blade Runner, by the way, is the European version, which has the narration, the lazy narration by Harrison Ford. And I actually think, as much as he's supposed to have said that, I think he did it half-assed because he thought the dialogue was really, really bad. I actually think him doing it half-assed makes the character sound very weary, and it suits the kind of noir feel to it. So that's the version of Blade Runner that I like the best. Excuse me, but I really enjoyed the film, the 2049, and I actually, the conclusion of the film I thought was the payoff for it. My only problem with it is I think that there's within the book of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, we're talking about androids, and I'm not quite sure that the android replicant thing seems to be becoming a bit blurred. But yeah, great Scott. But yeah, the Dune David Lynch Dune film is coming out here very shortly, I think, at the weekend. And although we have 30 days to wait for the Denis Villeneuve one here, we're seriously thinking about going to see the David Lynch one in the cinema. And the sound makes it evening. You're right, and I'm not sure, but you might want to check this. But I think his actually, I think David Lynch's Dune won an Oscar for sound. I might be wrong. Not that Oscars are mean much over this side of the pond. I think. No offense to anybody who likes the Oscars. I used to love them, to be honest. I love the Lynch Dune. The sound makes it. Lynch Dune was done. And what a monster! And yeah, gods, what a monster! You get your Jean-Luc Picard on. Was it Patrick Stewart? Make it so. Yeah, there you go. I think Patrick Stewart's brilliant in that. And if you look at, I think because of that, I think what they're trying to do with Dune was try to get that epic sensibility, that operatic sensibility that you get in Excalibur, that the over the topness, you know. Yes, the Lynch Dune is what I grew up on too. The costumes and the architecture are phenomenal, and Lynch cherry picks all the best lines from the novel. Excuse me. Yeah, there's enough of, I think, Giger stuff in there as well. I think in some of the architecture, I think it's really good, and I really really like the shields. To be honest with you, excuse me. I the whole shields, the look of them, the chunkiness of them. And especially when you see Duncan Idaho get his little bolt going through the shield, the slow bolt penetrating the shield. I think there's a lot to enjoy about David Lynch's Dune, and I know he's kind of disowned it because of as far as I understand it, it's because of putting the Butlerian Jihad kind of narration in the TV version and so on, and that's why that's the Walter, what do you call it? Is it Walter Smitty? Is that right? I'm Walter Mitty. I'm getting Walter Mitty mixed up with something. What is it we call it when a director will put his name on the? What's that? They all use the same. I'm having Alan Smithy. Thank you very much, Sean. having a mind fart there. That's it. Alan Smithy, the Alan Smithy version again. I think it's yeah, but I know he doesn't like it. But put it this way: when I did my videos here, I absolutely loathed them because of the problems with the sound. And I was, but I was quite upset with my own work. But I still put it up there and stuck by it. And you can always fix things later, I suppose. What cracks me up was one of the ships which showed up with Shaddam's arrival to take. I guess it's plainly a monopoly house. I think some of them are a bit transparent as well. I think there are little flaws in the special effects process. I think, but considering how big a book Dune is, and there is no penchant for making really long films in the 80s, I think to condense it into what he did, it's what ultimately led me to the books. And I really enjoyed it. Of course, with the ending of David Lynch's Dune really does make Paul look something quite different, I suppose. And the rain doesn't help, but it doesn't matter if you don't know that, I suppose. The Shields 100% agree. Yeah, there was something chunky about them, and I don't know. I thought they were very cool. You young pup, I think, is that it? The you young pup is my favorite Patrick Stewart moment in Dune. But it's such an eminently quotable, as somebody said that. Let me see who said it there. He's picked all the right quotes, if you know what I mean. And I think even Spanner on the microphone on the Spice Harvester were taxi. Yes, the kind of attempt to make this sort of well, I think a lot of people didn't get it at the time because there's an attempt to show a society that is that has I suppose what I would call retarded atavism, that to be like your grandfathers, that the whole retardation of society to be like the Butlerian jihad. Excuse me. And I think it's meant to kind of give a sense of, was it maybe the Ottoman Empire or something like that. One of the best lines from the Lynch version was lost in the cutting room for Hamlet's death scene. Yeah. I think there's a few things have turned up on from the Lynch version. The Lynch version, yeah. Thanks, Eric. Yeah, it's a pity. I mean, there used to be all this talk about this really long Dune version, but sorry, version of Dune, but with the David Lynch film. But I think it's a pity that he's kind of disowned it. I'm a person that believes in owning your shit, if you see what I mean. Yeah, so Gilded Age audio aesthetics. Yeah. Hello, VT. How's it going? We're having just a natter. Does anybody have any more questions for me? Blue Velvet is his masterpiece. I'm a big gusher for the Elephant Man, I have to say. I really do like that. But I haven't seen a lot of David Lynch's new films, I have to say. I can't really think the last the last David Lynch film, I can't remember the last one I saw at all. It might be Lost Highway. That's showing my age. And I'm a bit of a film buff, but I just don't really get around to seeing a lot of films these days. What's a Gilded Highway? Blue Velvet is his. What's anybody else got any other questions? You see, part of Lynch's aesthetic put me in mind of steampunk. Lost Highway was excellent. It was indeed, Sean. Steampunk I do like myself. Michael Moorcock's a bit of your man there as well for that, I think. And I'm wondering what you all think of. How many of you seen the film, by the way, out there? Do we have an audience of everybody who's not seen Dune yet? Or has anybody actually seen the new film? That's my guitar, Jude. Hi, Jude. That's one of my guitars, actually. All right. There are the rest of them. If you like. So the guitar behind you is called Uriel. They've all got names. Twin Peaks. The original Twin Peaks I thought was fantastic. What other books do you consider as good as Dune? I consider it. I'll be honest with you. I'm not I'm not a fall down and worship Dune guy. I think it's a great book. I think there's many books far better than it. But it's just my personal opinion. Um, Dune is a particular book. It depends on how you look at it. Books that I think are much better than Dune, or as good as Dune. Sorry. Uh, let's see. Even's got no cinema on his own. Um, well, I've mentioned a few of them. There's some standalone books in science fiction. Um, but there's a book called well, I think Flowers for Algernon's a great book, um, and it's in a class of its own. I think it has many imitators these days. Um, a Canticle for Leibowitz is a book that really punched me quite hard in the face. To be honest with you, if you want an honest and really just wow, oof. 1984 is a pretty good book. We by Zamyatin. I think Roadside Picnic is, I've got to say, one of the finest books I've ever read, um, by the Strugatsky brothers. Um, I'll get to you in a wee second, Eric, in terms of what I thought about the enemy. Let me see, though, books that are. Ubik is my standout Philip K. Dick book, which I think is just exceptional. And Ubik is a book that you'll read twice, because it's very interesting. And it's the kind of thing where reality will break down in your armpit 70% of the time. It's an absolute cracker, and it's sort of a whodunit, but it's not. Um, but it is by I love it, absolutely love it, and I think it's Philip K. Dick at his absolute finest. Um, not too far back, I suppose. Gene Wolfe's Book of the New Sun is exceptional. Um, I'm a particular fan of the last three. In fact, well, all of the culture books, but the last three culture books by Ian Banks are something else altogether. I think they're just, as a modern science fiction novel, they're fantastic. Behold the Man, I think, is a gut puncher. I love it. Um, but there's an awful lot within science fiction. Um, to be honest with you, um, there's so many ideas within the genre, and we have a range of different writers. You have a bunch of writers within the science fiction genre who dabble, I suppose, or don't like to be considered science fiction writers. Excuse me. So I often thought was interesting about Ian Banks is that he writes fiction under Ian Banks and science fiction under Ian M. Banks. He has two different names for separating out his science fiction. Um, Very tasteful, says Jude. My acoustic guitar's called Melody. Any thoughts on Lovecraft and his recent explosion in pop culture? And all this reading suggests I'm going to have to get an Audible subscription soon. I'll just jump back. Eric, we've had a wee bit of a chat about the enemy. I suppose the enemy, as we were talking about, a bit like we were having a wee natter about Daniel and Marty earlier. There's three or four different opinions, but thinking machines is probably the main way to go. But I was just saying that if you have a look at the appendices of Dune, there's one sentence in Dune in there that tells you that the breeding program is not the Bene Gesserit's breeding program, but it's I think a piece of payoff that's put down for by Frank Herbert in the first book that would probably be delivered in the seventh book, and unfortunately we'll never know. You can take the Brian Herbert KJA ideas, I suppose. It's up to yourself, really. But I always enjoyed speculating on knowing that whenever I read Dune, knowing that it was not finished and it was not going to be finished, is kind of what I really enjoyed about that kind of work, I suppose. I'm originally a classicist, so I'm used to working with literature from the ancient world that's often unfinished or lost or is fragmented, and part of me really enjoys, although I don't like to speculate too much, but it's worth doing if you have other evidence to work with. But so I actually like things that aren't finished. I don't have a problem with them. And the good thing, I suppose, in trying to think about what might have been is everyone. I think we talked about it a bit earlier, just saying that we had three or four options there. They could be face dancers. They could be the enemy. Could be the artificial intelligence. could be something new, and they're all quite equally valid. Um, what do you think, by the way? Let us know, Eric. Jude has asked any thoughts on Lovecraft and his recent explosion in pop culture. Um, I suppose the internet's different, but I've always thought Lovecraft was pretty well read within the science fiction, fantasy, horror community, I suppose. Again, I've been reading, he's been on my library turntables since I was a little kid. So I've been reading, I've got a nice collection of everything by Lovecraft. Quite a heavy book, but I'm working my way through it a wee bit at the minute. As I tend to read 5 or 6 different things at once. So I've been reading the Arabian Nights one a night for the last couple of years, and the idea is to read it the way it's meant to be delivered, I suppose. But I'm getting through the 1,000 nights in one night, and Lovecraft is great. And yeah, it speaks to that kind of existential terror, I suppose. But he's a great writer. That's the thing. Robert E. Howard as well. I've been reading some of the Conan stories, and these guys are great writers. There's a difference in the pulp fiction around at the time. It's the same with Burroughs as well. But I absolutely love their style, and as much as Conan the Barbarian, for example, is your sword and sandal fantasy, the writing is so good. I think it has definitely got, same with Lovecraft, high literary chops, in my opinion. So explosion in pop culture. I'm not too sure why, um, if that's the case, but he's certainly an author who deserves attention, and I think he's got many imitators. Um, Let me see. As a classicist, have you read the seminars by Nietzsche? Collected his anti-education when he bemoans that what people needs to know comes from the classics, but modern man is befuddled by newspapers. I've read some Nietzsche. I've got the Antichrist around somewhere, and a couple of, yeah. I don't hold much truck with Nietzsche, I'm afraid. And the Nietzschean thing's quite interesting because it always emerges with Robert E. Howard's Conan, and I don't hold much stock in, but I haven't read the seminars collected as anti-education. No, Sean. Um, I'll tell you something about the classics, if you like. I'm working class as the mud, and the classical education is the one thing that's kind of kept out of the working class in this country. You'll not find anyone like me for miles around, and you can't study classical studies at any university in Ireland, north or south. So it's very much seen as elitist, and how I got to be one is another long story. Um, but I was certainly rejected from every university that I applied to study classical studies at. I still got there, but it's considered elitist. Um, but it's one of those. I think everybody should get that kind of education. It's the study of civilization itself, I think. Um, Though I would joking, my wife would tell you that I would say that classical studies is the study of tits, willies, and bombs. Isn't that sorry? But no, that's actually true if you think about it for a bit. But thank you, Eric. Let me see. Sorry, I'm catching up a wee bit here. While I think the unknown enemy was the return of thinking machines, I'm not sure about the connection of them and Daniel and Marty. Yeah. Well, that's the mystery, isn't it? And there is some sort of web there. There's an implied some sort of connection, but and possibly an additional level of layer to reality. But I don't. Yeah, I mean, to figure out what the heck's going on in the last couple of pages of is it Chapter House Dune? Is the last Dune book? Or is it Herbert? I think it's Chapter House, isn't it? It is. It was a cliffhanger, and it's at this point, some people thought maybe Frank was milking the series, but I'm pretty certain that he made a point of ending it on the 7th book, and I think it was genuinely intended to be what it is, an absolute humdinger of a cliffhanger. And he's not going to answer it for you, and that's a motif. you'll find the odd bit of the odd quotations from Frank Herbert throughout my work, and you'll find he says this a lot. He doesn't want to give you the answers. He wants to make you work for them, and he also wants you to buy his next book. I think it's very important to remember. Um, Personally, but there we go, Eric. I hope. But as I said, it's open to interpretation, really. That sounds everything we need to know can be learned from Shakespeare. Yeah. I don't know. Shakespeare's a massive plagiarist of the classical world, and to be or not to be, that's the question. Was it the nobler the mind to suffer? The slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. Slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. That's Xenophon. That's his Anabasis. And the plot of Hamlet is basically the Oresteia. Hamlet is Orestes, if you like. I heard that was for the elite and Shakespeare is for the working class, for example. No, absolutely not. Education's for the work is the idea is that education is for the elites, I would say. But the classical education is considered the best, and about 100 years ago, I suppose, 150 years ago in the UK, if you were getting educated, if you were lucky enough to get an education, that would be the education you would be getting. But it's very much reading classics, as in the grammar schools are called grammar schools because that's where you did classical languages. So it's either Greek or Latin grammar. So we have quite a few grammar schools that don't teach either of those things anymore. Um, but no, simply put, the classical studies is the best education because it's the broadest education possible, and it teaches you everything about how we got to where we are from pretty much nothing. But it's the basis of all Western civilization is the Greek world, and and then following that along the Roman world, unfortunately. Um, Best years of my York Street Art College. Excellent. I was at where was I at? I was at an alumni of Strawberry Hill, which is in London, and then I was at the University of Liverpool where I studied science fiction literature for a year. And then I've been at the University of Ulster a couple of times. There we go. Let him go is higher under the ending. Ah, yes, evening. Thank you. Heard that. So I've often mourned the loss of the ancient Greek tragedies and comedies. What wonderfulness was lost. Um, you can find them about. A lot of them are reinterpreted in theatre these days, and some of them are very very popular to this day. Lysistrata is one of the funniest sex comedies you could ever ever go and see, and that's um, it's often reinterpreted. It's on quite a lot, uh, but you'll find the classical playwrights, Aeschylus and Aristophanes and Euripides and Sophocles. Still you'll catch them still at the theatre now and then, but often it's I don't know. The classical world's a pretty violent place. You mentioned the University of Ulster. Have you done any work with the local university? No, I do not work with the local university. I'm a one-man show, and almost an anti-academic. So I have no affiliations with any teaching institutions whatsoever. I work as a Moadib. Moadib. Did I get that right? Moadib. I'm a Moadib. I'm a private tutor. And I've been doing this for fun basically since decided to do these videos since COVID hit, because I suppose the education system's not particularly enlightened in Northern Ireland at all, and so I don't work within it. I work outside of it, very deliberately. Um, but there you go. Yeah, no. Within the classical world, you'll find I'll tell you this if you'd like to know. Is that why did I do a PhD in Dune? And it's to do if you look at the three main chapters, you kind of figure out something about myself. But basically, I wear a number of different hats, and one of them is that the great love of my life is the classical world, and that's where my head resides mostly. So I read two types of fiction pretty much. I read science fiction and I read ancient books, and the older the better, basically. And I don't really like reading much after 1066, to be honest, except for science fiction. I like some fantasy, and I quite like a lot of old-fashioned horror. But so the classical studies hat. I used to be a lecturer in computing science, so I have a master's in computing and information systems, and I have a doctorate in philosophy, and I did a wee funny master's in literature. But I have a degree in Irish studies as well. So I'm a multidisciplinary kind of person. I get bored easily, and it was the Greek mythology aspect of, and to a degree, the philosophy in general and mythology. These things are what really got me into Dune. And anything among those you would recommend as someone who's read Dante's Inferno? Dante's Inferno is one of the things that got me into it. Actually, I read. My brother's 8 years older than me. I read his copy at school. I used to read his books. So I read Dante's Inferno. I was about 12, I think. No, about 10 actually, and enjoyed it. And anything amongst those that you would recommend? Yeah, there's tons. Project Gutenberg has almost the entire classical world there. If you like the Anabasis, I think we were talking about, by Xenophon's a great read. It's a true story of the world's first professional mercenary army. The Voyage of the Argo, by Apollonius of Rhodes, is a cracker. I think if anybody loves fantasy, one of my turn-offs of fantasy is I find the mythology there so often, and epics and sagas from the ancient world being rewritten by modern writers, and I actually got to the point where I preferred to go back and read the original stories. So I'd highly recommend, if you like that kind of thing. If you like fantasy literature, epics and sagas are really right up your street. But a lot of them are particularly violent. But the Epic of Gilgamesh is a great one, and I think you can get on Oxford. Would be the Penguin Classics might have an edition of another complementary text, which is called Poems of Heaven and Hell from Ancient Mesopotamia. They're a good start for the ancient world. Give you the first flood narrative, and I don't know, particularly for myself. Apollonius of Rhodes, The Voyage of the Argo, is great. If you know the story of Apollonius, who's not from Rhodes, it's hilarious. But let me see. What else? Beowulf. If I read Beowulf twice, at least once a year, and I read the Epic of Gilgamesh every year, pretty much, just because they don't take long to read. Let me see. Hafnal Saga is a good one. There's a lot of the Viking sagas are pretty good. The Icelandic sagas, they're incredibly violent, and you need a bit of sometimes put them down. And I would, let me see. Some of the other things, I suppose, a bit more modern. Journey to the West is pretty good, by Wu Chang, and the monkey story, and Outlaws of the Marsh as well by Shai Nayan. Sorry, I've jumped way forward about a couple of thousand years and gone to China. But all the Greek plays, Aeschylus is a good read. You can get all 7 of his plays pretty much. Let's have a wee look. Sorry, I'm rambling. A waste of my talents. Anything among those you would recommend? So Dante's Inferno is pretty good. Boccaccio's Decameron, and I'd recommend that. Well, the Canterbury Tales is anything to do with the matter of Britain, I think, which is any text that has to do with King Arthur. So that includes Shakespeare, it's a body of literature that covers about 1,000 years. I think is pretty interesting. Anything to do with the matter of France is quite good. Matter of France is anything to do with Charlemagne. So the Song of Roland is a decent epic. I just read all. There's a whole lot there. I'll try and have a wee think next time, maybe, and come up with some other stuff. But The Voyage of the Argo. If you want your ultimate book on Greek mythology, that's an extant book by an ancient Greek, is Apollodorus's Bible, if you like, or Library of Greek Mythology. And it's a fantastic read. And you compare it with Robert Graves's book on the Greek myths, because he tried to kind of do a modern day version of it. And so it's very good about showing you the main Greek myths, but giving you the local Greece. There's no such nation as Greece back then. It's just lots of little city states and stuff, but giving you the local flavor and variations of all the different gods and stories. But Dante's Inferno is a good read. You see, Ulysses has a particular place in his book, and it's all because of the siege of Troy. And so there's not many people quite close to the devil in the last circle of hell, but Ulysses is just up above him, and it's because he comes up with the Trojan horse idea, and that's partly to do with the myth that Augustus Caesar wanted Virgil to sort of perpetuate, that Augustus is a descendant of Aeneas, who's one of the legendary founders of Rome, and some of the Matter of Britain plays do this. Shakespeare's King Lear and Macbeth are both written by Shakespeare to create a lineage for James I, James VI, to show that he's a descendant of Banquo and a descendant of Lear, I think, which are on the king list. You see, it shows one's a Scottish king, one's a British king. Let's see about all books that are public to me, and so many LibriVox recordings are available on YouTube. Yeah, I'm going to do a couple actually, Babs. I've been doing a few audiobooks, but I'm going to do an audiobook of the Betrayal, if I can say it right, Betrayal Myomachia, which is Homer's. It's attributed to Homer, and it's a children's version of the Iliad, and it's the Battle of the Mice and Frogs. So I'm looking forward to adding to that. I think there's a German version of it. I'm not too sure if there's an English one. I've only seen Jason and the Argonauts. Have to read the original. Sean, yeah, the original goes so far, and then the myth is actually carried on elsewhere. I'll tell you this much: it never ends well for any hero in Greek mythology. And if you've seen the film, you've missed the absolute pure horror of the end of that. But Medea is the wife of Jason, and if you want to know how the Jason and the Argonauts thing ends, have a look at Euripides' Medea, because Jason's not very nice to his wife, and he ditches her, and she's the daughter of Helios, I think, the king of the sun, one of the Greek sun gods. So no, things do not go well for Jason at all. The four Chinese classics, yes, Sean, I've read two, and I've read the Journey to the West, which is fantastic, and I've read the Outlaws of the Marsh, which is also fantastic. They're fantastic, absolutely very hard to get here for a long time. I actually had to go on holiday to buy my books, believe it or not, and I had to go to a Chinese bookstore in Amsterdam to get my over there somewhere. If I can do this right, there they are. Journey to the West, Monkey Magic from the TV show. I've got a deck of cards with all the characters from the same shop, and I've got another deck of cards with the 108 heroes from the Outlaws of the Marsh. If any of you have never seen it, there are a couple of old Japanese TV shows of the Water Margin and Monkey, and they're brilliant. And the books are actually quite funny. But I haven't read the other two, and I really want to get round to reading them. Stephen Fry did a wonderful work on the ancient Greek myths. Yeah, he's well vested in the classics. One called Mythos and the other one Heroes. So he's kind of updating and retelling these things for a modern audience, which is great. I mean, I think he's made it very accessible. The problem with a lot of this stuff is it depends on your sensibilities, but I've been reading through the Icelandic sagas a while back, and they're about this thick, and I got about halfway through, and I had to put the book down simply because of the brutality and the level of violence to children, and it's slaughter fests, and it can be, stuff like this can be quite hard to take. The Iliad is an incredibly violent book as well, or poem, sorry, but it doesn't come across that way, but it's often in the descriptions of the deaths of heroes. But there we go. If you're interested, that the Dan Simmons Ilium, and Olympus books are kind of, the idea of those is that there's a recreation of the Trojan War on Mars, and it's kind of done by future historians, if you like, and it's quite interesting. I'll not go into it, but it's Dan Simmons works with a lot of intertextuality, particularly the Hyperion books, stuff like that I very much enjoy. Hyperion works on a whole range of different levels if you understand the myth mythology, and like a lot of these things, I suppose. I've gone off topic a wee bit, but I was talking about mythology, and I suppose that's what brought me to Dune was the whole Atreides myth. And well, the Atreides are actually historical. Would you ever consider doing some videos on more classic literature? Yeah, sure. I've kind of set my pitched my tent as a science fiction station, but I am pretty well read, and I read a lot of. I suppose Victorian literature covers a lot of science fiction, and a lot of science fiction is in the ancient world. And as I said, I like my epics and sagas, so they are quite lengthy to read. And as much as I don't have the resources that I had, I suppose, whenever I did my PhD, so I kind of have my own library and access to the internet. But yeah, I love the classical literature, and it's a lot of it's free, and it's be surprised you what I think there's a wonderful sense of disconnection between modern people and the ancient world, and I think particularly we look at books like the Bible. Bible's a library of books, books from this period that give us a certain view of the world, and we've no idea how sophisticated and clever these people were. And if you understand that the Antikythera mechanism is an analog computer that's built approximately 200 BC, most likely by Archimedes. He's probably one of the handful of people that could have built it. And if you look at the development of, for example, of water mills, the ancient world is a very smart, clever place, and we tend to look back on these people as being somehow primitive, or not as smart as we are, and it tends to be the other way around. Actually, we still can't figure out the Roman concrete's still superior than ours. These people did a lot of things better than us, and they're fascinating, I think. The only thing, of course, that people have lost touch with the ancient world in the period when computers have become as ubiquitous and powerful as they are. Yeah. But again, it's if you ask most people when was the first computer, and they're probably going to talk to you about Charles Babbage rather than rather than Archimedes in 200 BC. That's kind of my point, But I agree. Everything the computers are, they're a tool, aren't they? I suppose. But people used to be computers, and that's an interesting thing that Dune picks up on. One of the things in Dune is the human mentats, I suppose. But there are professionally people who were computers. And is it what do you call her? Engineer? Who am I thinking of? Is it Jenner? It's that kind of was it Regency period literature? I'm trying to think of the book, but one of the pieces of advice in it is if you're considering a husband, make sure that he's a good computer. Isn't that it? Like, it's quite so the mythology. Sorry, quickly back to the whole House Atreides thing. I'm thinking on doing a wee bit of work there for you guys on the House of Atreus and the myth of Atreus. There's been a couple of videos done on it, and unfortunately they've featured a wee bit of what I call iconotropy, which is where we've accidentally or deliberately misinterpreted a myth. So I thought I might actually do a wee bit on setting people straight on the Atreides myth itself. There's an awful lot of Paul and Leto within that collection of myths that come out of this what's called the Cypriad. So if you know your Greek literature, the Iliad and the Odyssey are two epics, each 24 books long, 24 chapters long, if you like, covering a brief periods in the Trojan War. So the Iliad is kind of the very end of the Trojan War, which is a 10-year war. Excuse me. And the Odyssey begins with the journey of Odysseus to get home, which takes 10 years. So, but they're actually tiny parts of a much bigger epic called the Cypriad, most of which is lost. Okay, evening, take it easy. Thanks for joining us. All the best. 2 a.m. Take care now. There we go. So what was I saying there? Sorry, I can't remember. Oh, the Cypriad. Yeah, sorry. Apologies, folks. So I've been talking a long time as well. My wife's starting to get, but the wife needs to pee. She has to walk past the camera, you see, to get to the throne that she doesn't want to. Um, but there we go. But the Atreides myth in particular, I think, folks, is very interesting. And if you look at some of the pictures that I put in the videos, they're very particular pictures. Particularly the Renaissance art, you'll see images to do with the sacrifice of the virgin deer at Aulis, if you like. It's the sacrifice of Iphigenia at Aulis. Is in particular importance, I think, to the Dune story, and it's the point where just before the battle, and Paul cannot act, and he's waiting to see that his son has been killed. This ties to House Atreides and Agamemnon will make a great vid, give those unfamiliar with Greek roots a better idea of the tragedy of the house. Yeah, and well, the interesting thing, I suppose, is you might get some different camps on this, but I'm not in any of them. The actions of the Trojan War are history. And simply put, if you take out the overlay of the gods, etc., there's enough physical evidence to say these things happened and are pretty much responsible for the Bronze Age collapse. So there are myths associated with the Atreides, and Atreus and his two sons, Agamemnon and Menelaus. And the curse doesn't go back all the way to the beginning of the family's line, but which is what some people think. There's actually a couple of different curses, but the Atreides refers to these two men, which are the war leaders of the Trojan, the Greeks as we call them, or the Hellenic peoples, and the Trojan War. So their particular myth is to do with what Sean was talking about. Is a repetition of a cyclical repetition of familial violence, and it's actually the sacrifice of Iphigenia. It's not the sacrifice of Iphigenia that begins this, but it's the main catalyst for all the familial murders that happen after the Trojan War. So you can get to understand the house, the Atreides, Agamemnon, and Menelaus through the Iliad and the Odyssey and how they appear in that. And we have a couple of other fragments and things. But then within the general literature of the ancient world, we have various plays that take these stories on and so on. So the Oresteia is the main play that deals with the house, with the tragedy of the Agamemnon. So the first play is called the Agamemnon, and it's all to do with Agamemnon returning home, and basically it's in order for the 1,000 ships to sail, the goddess, it's to do with the sacrifice of a sacred deer, and the goddess Artemis, and she stopped the winds, and the Trojan War cannot begin. They're all in a harbor at an island called Aulis, and basically Agamemnon must sacrifice his own daughter Iphigenia in order for the Trojan War to begin. And this is a bit like the analogy between Leto and the first Leto, the second, the baby that he cannot or will not save. Excuse me, is there. There's different things that, if you understand different plays, there's different things that you may understand is that either Iphigenia is murdered or she's not. That the gods are so shocked by this that they actually swap her for a doppelganger, and that she's carried away to Egypt. So the first play, the Agamemnon, is about really Agamemnon's wife is Clytemnestra, and she's the sister of Helen of Troy, and basically she murders her husband Agamemnon as soon as he comes home for killing his daughter. At which point, then it's up to her son to kill her for killing the father, and then it goes to the daughter to kill the brother for killing the mother. And this idea of familial revenge is particularly associated with this family who often feed their children in pies. They're quite noted for it. They're not a nice bunch of people at all, and their original curse comes from, I think, trying to feed Zeus a person in a pie. I believe. I'll have to reread a wee bit of this. But the whole point about I suppose the interesting thing about the Atreides as a choice of name for the hero of Dune is that it's meant to give him Paul and Leto a direct descent all the way back to these real historical people who are embedded in myth and history. And the point I suppose I like to make as a classicist is that this family are the poster people for slaughtering their own people, and it's doubtful that anyone from the Atreides family that's in Greek mythology would survive long enough to get to the year 10,191. So it's a self-slaughtering family, if you like, and in Greek mythology, the goddess Nemesis deals with revenge, but when it's murder within a family, there's a specific set of goddesses that deal with that, and they're called the Furies. And so they plague. If you don't take revenge, they will plague you they'll drive you mad until you revenge the familial murder. So it's just like what Sean was saying, this cyclical murder pattern, almost a spiral of murder that goes on within this family historically and mythologically speaking, and in literature. Is quite bizarre. So that they're called the plays are the Agamemnon, the libation bearers, and the Eumenides, which means the kindly ones. And the whole point is it's just murder, 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 and in the end, the goddess in the Greek trilogy by Aeschylus, the goddess Athena comes down, and the play is also to do with why Athens is named after Athena, by the way. So it's also kind of an origin story for the city of Athens. And she comes down, just that's enough. And it's these three, I'm putting a stop to it. This cycle cannot perpetuate. It's just ridiculous. So she transforms the Furies into the goddesses known as the Eumenides, which means the kindly ones. And she sets them as a charge over Athens to look after it so they're to be the guardians of Athens in a kind of fair and judicial sense, and puts everything to bed. And this is kind of really I think it's pretty much the original Deus Ex Machina, but it's done in such a sensible manner. So that's kind of but there are various stories and attributes to the Atreides and what happens after. And of course, after the Trojan War, Menelaus just returns home with Helen. Yeah, there's a few things to do with whether Iphigenia is killed or not, and it's that level of the embed of the Greek myths. And I know a lot of the Dune readers from all around the world have spotted their own cultures and their own myths inside the Dune universe, and that's what I particularly like about it. That it has a kind of all-encompassing approach to the myth, and that's kind of got to do with the approach to religion as well, and the Butlerian Jihad and the Great Convention, but there we go. So I will try and put together a few wee things like this, and if you do have any suggestions for the channel, as I said, I'm a wee bit new to all of this, but I'm considering it a hobby and therapy, if you like. It's quite good fun. So if you have any suggestions, and it takes about a week to throw together an episode, to be honest with you, fire them away to me in the email, or we'll see if we can get another wee chat like this up again soon. Because something, let's just see where we got to there. Times the House of Shades and Agamemnon will make a great vid. Give those for a great risk. Okay, like Titus. Is that? I'm not sure which Titus you mean, Sean. Got a whole bunch of them in the ancient world. Sean Wyland, that would be fantastic. Thank you. Your depth of knowledge is truly impressive. Oh, thanks very much, Sean. That's very kind. I'm from a generation that had 3 TV channels and radio, and the Queen and the BBC shut them all down at midnight. So I used to do a lot of reading under the bed covers, and I have a bit of a bizarre sleep disorder, so I don't sleep very well. So I read a lot. That's the one. Thank you, Titus Andronicus. There we go. I think, wasn't there an Anthony Hopkins film? Can I read that earlier? Sorry. Well, listen, I'll tell you what, folks. My wife's down to go to the loo, and she doesn't want to run past the camera. So I'm going to say goodnight, and thank you very much for joining us. And it's been really nice to chat to you all properly. I'm trying to set up. I've got a Zoom room set up at the minute, and I'm looking at a couple of things. Tell the wife thanks for her patience too. Until next time, Sean. I will. She's not a Dune fan. I'm trying to get her to read it, by the way. But listen, I will say good night to you all. Thank you very much, and I'm definitely going to do this again. In fact, as we're doing the videos each night, we'll see if anybody's got some Q&As we can pop on. I'll have a wee look and try and see what we can do. But this was trial run, and thank you very much. It's been brilliant. I hope you're all keeping yourselves safe in this strange time, but please look after yourselves, and if you've got some questions, maybe think of them for me for next time, and we'll see what we can do. All the very best, folks, and I'm going to say good night. Bye-bye. I don't want to... Oh, thanks, Pat. Good night, folks.
See it.
Hang on. Your stream will stop immediately, and you will no longer be live. There we go.